So welcome to our last free exchange as part of our Outdoor Institute of Art programme, devised by Yasmin Canvin. And great to have you all here, our audience in the physical realm and online. Jessica will be tweeting highlights throughout, and Martin Steed will be live streaming. Online audiences can ask questions via Jessica on Twitter when we begin our discussion. This will be a very different free exchange. As is the case now, we tour venues to suit our theme, and tonight we are at the Cross Keys Inn in Kings Cliffe. However, we usually stay put inside or outside the venue, but this will be a walk and talk scenario, as tonight's theme is art and psychogeography. And what better way to explore this by exploring the village of Kings Cliffe. Before I introduce our two speakers, I'd like to briefly mention a bit about psychogeography, as a few people have been asking me what it is. In my view, psychogeography is something we all probably practice every day. Imagine yourself walking through a place where you lived as a child. You may have memories or emotions attached to buildings, a street corner or a local park. Or you're exploring a city for the first time, as you discover things around corners such as blue plaques in London tells you who lived there, or places that evoke atmosphere. Simply put, it's psychology and geography, the psychology of place. The term originated in the 1950s in Paris, and an early practitioner was Guy Debord. But retrospective validation goes even earlier back, as practitioners such as William Blake or Daniel Defoe for his travel writings. Contemporary writers include Ian Sinclair and Peter Ackroyd, but psychogeography extends to all art forms. So tonight our two speakers, although not explicitly so, have psychogeography running through their relative practices. So I'd now like to introduce you to our two speakers, Kate Genever and Carole Wright. Kate Genever is an artist and farmer based in South Lincolnshire on her family's traditional mixed farm. Much of her work sees her co-producing outcomes with individuals, groups, artists, curators and academics in diverse settings such as her family farm, a Yorkshire council estate, a women's prison, Hull, a caravan park, Venice and an asylum seekers charity. It's a lot.
Sounds mental.
Carole Wright is a community gardener, apiarist, walker and proud South Londoner from Brixton. She has won 2 awards from the South Bank Centre and the Peabody Trust for her community work, and this year Carole joined a team of community advocates to join the Big Lunch Community Walk, showing the importance of communication and how it can bring about positive change. I'd now like to invite Kate and then Carole to talk a bit more about what they do before we head out on our walk. So, over to you, Kate.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. I've brought random selection of artefacts from home that I'm going to hand out. But first, I'm going to hand out. This is some images of my work. So either you can just pass them around and help yourself. Okay, so for the tech, this is the stone image, if anybody wants that anywhere at the back. Okay, so yes, I am an artist and I work in relation to place, and that means that I embed myself over really long periods of time, and I work with communities, individuals, organisations around my practice's key concerns, which are improvisation and care in relation to a local stress, which could be environmental, it could be social, it could be geographic. And I'll explain that more as we go along. And the places that I choose to work, they sound random as Emma spoke them out, but they are actually often linked by their relation to water. So they're places that are half land and half water. So where the land and the water question the status of each other. And that's often how I pick where I choose to work. And so that, for example, is the Fens, Hull, Venice, coastal communities, etc. And one of the things I brought as a prop, this is the first thing to pass up. It's not a prop, it's a real thing. This is a fossilised shell that I found on the farm in a field at home. And these come to the surface, and so clearly the places that I farm were once the sea. So that's the first thing. And so that's an example of things that I look for or find. So yeah, that kind of also introduces the fact that I'm a farmer. As Emma said, I work with my family in a traditional mixed farm with a Hereford cross-suckler cow herd and sheep and various arable things. I am the chief lammer and the person that calves the cows, and I do drive the baler tractor as well. So it's extremely hands-on. Lots of people always say, God, that's so different. You're a farmer and an artist. And actually, I would say that they're incredibly similar in that it's all about paying attention, and it's about walking and looking and thinking and being really aware of the land and the communities and how things work. And also it's incredibly creative, and there's lots of improvisation happening and clearly lots of care looking after sheep and cows. My dad, who isn't an artist and is a full-time farmer, always says things like, oh, but Kate, my job is more important, farming's more important because I'm feeding your bellies, I'm feeding the world. And I always argue that art is feeding the soul. So collectively we're trying to make things better. I found a quote recently which I was going to read because I quite like it. I never believe land is neutral. It reaches out and offers guidance if we learn to listen. Approach it with an uncalculating mind and with an attitude of regard. Take time and trouble to discern the variety of its moods and creatures. And that was a person writing particularly about landscape, but it seems to fit what I do as an artist. So thank you to Firmin Woods for inviting me. My microphone's just moved. And this invitation, when Emma first got in touch with me, we started talking about mapping and how we both love mapping. And I think I might be to blame for the walking bit of this evening. Oh, yeah. So sorry about that. And because I said, oh, I love walking in the dark. And then I said, oh, and I'm also interested in the Lunar Society. And for those of you who don't know about the Lunar Society, that was a group of sort of industrialists in Birmingham in the late 1700s who used to meet on the full moon every month in order to allow them to be guided home by the light of the moon. But they were interested there were scientists and artists and also people like Wedgwood, and all of those people came together and to discuss technical advancement. So this is our Lunar Society reinvention tonight. And the walk seemed important, as Emma said, because we're talking about psychogeography, a theme which was introduced by Firmin Woods, and it isn't a word that I use at all to describe what I do, even though I'm guessing some of what I do is similar to what it says it is. And I read about it, because obviously I've read about it before, but I thought it might be interesting to hear the description. And to add to what Emma said, it's the study of the laws and efforts of the geographical environment, consciously or not, on the emotions and behaviours of the individuals. So for me, it goes back to that idea of farming, of being conscious of a place and thinking about an emotional connection to a place. But to me, the theme psychogeography is kind of too performative and too, dare I say this word, bourgeois in this room, in that it comes and it talks a lot about the fact that you are a flaneur and you do these things called derives, which is kind of walking and getting lost and looking at the world in a kind of inactive way, and that is not at all where I come from. And my practice derives from an urgency. It doesn't come from a site of privilege, which to me a derive and flaneuring is all about. So in my, I've got to get quick. In my attempt to explain what I do, given that you've got lots of photographs, I thought we'd do something. This is also my science bit, given that we've been a Lunar Society person. Would you, Tate, want to pass it on? You will all need a piece of masking tape, which I can stick on here. And what we're going to do is we're going to make something called a Mobius strip. And you will need a piece of masking tape as well. Take one, pass it on. And let me just do this. I'm going to overrun my 15 minutes, I can see. Thanks. Masking tape for the back. Could I have a strip if there's one anywhere to go in? Has anybody got... no, there should be plenty, I think. Has anybody got the strips? So, yeah, pass them back, please. Do you need more masking tape?
Yeah.
There you go. I'm going to show you. Yeah, just need a piece of that. I'm going to leave that there. So, a Mobius strip is an amazingly beautiful, clever, scientific, curious thing, magical thing. And you take a piece of paper like this that's got two sides. You put it together like this. I'm not sure if the camera can see. And you twist it once and join those two things together. And then you use your masking tape to stick it together. And what happens is that you've got a thing that was double-sided. And now if you put your finger on and you trace the surface, it's continuous. It doesn't have two sides anymore. It just has one surface. And this is an example. It's a beautiful, clever, amazing thing that never ends. And the reason I chose to do this, did you want to do one? Have you seen it? Is that it kind of explains how I work in communities, in that you have to be curious, you have to be analytical, you have to look for the beauty, you have to see where the magic is. And so I was going to give you two examples of work that I've done recently. One is in Hull, which is a commission, and I'm employed as an artist investigator. And so the Mobius strip for me is a perfect example of what that means, in that I've been asked to investigate a postcode area of Hull to see what's happening, to see what's not being seen by other people. I have been asked to look at what assets are there rather than what are the negatives. I'm looking to make connections. I'm looking for the magic of the place. And it's an area that's really, it's like super deprived, and they want to see how culture could support this area and how could artist methodologies be used to generate activity and grow this area rather than a traditional method of looking at economics as a way to regenerate. And so that's one commission of how I'm working. And then I start with absolutely no idea what the end will look like, and I don't know what the artwork will be. And it might be that I just spend lots of hours walking and chatting. I do a lot of chatting. There's a word that comes to mind which I'm interested in, which is the word to fathom. And I use it in terms of I have to fathom a place out, and it's a bit like these special things. And the word fathom originates from this idea that it's you're putting your arms out, and this measurement is a fathom, it's 6 foot. And it's this idea that to be embraced and to bring somebody closer to your heart is to fathom somebody. And so it's also to understand and to bring somebody closer. And so this word in Hull makes a lot of sense. So that's what I'm doing in Hull, fathoming. And then the second, and I'm drawing to an end, second example I wanted to do was to think about how I might start, because you've seen the sheet of all of these images, which include drawings and wall drawings and projections and all different things. And I thought I'd do it in Kings Cliffe. And so I came on a visit. And the reason I came to Kings Cliffe, partly because I'd been here, but also I have a connection, because 3 doors up that way, I have a relative. I have a blue sticker in the window to a Liz Genever. And this is my connection into this village. That's all I knew about this village. And so I came to look. And I wanted to say what I did. So I came and looked at the blue plaque. I visited the Heritage Centre. I met the volunteers. I discussed their connections, their time served and their great work. I found out about the loss of 2 bakers, the post office that's now a home, the roads, the curbs, the proximity of the woods and the craft. We talked about how the Heritage Centre is 21 years old and how they wanted to do something to mark that, or the study of it. We talked about the skills of people on the blue plaques and wondered at what skills were in the houses now, things we couldn't see. I found a balloon, traces of people scratched into the walls, both past and present, and how this wasn't dissimilar to the chalk drawings I do on places that I know. Then I found the 3 quints, which you can pass out, and it had a handwritten sign that said, 3 quints, please help yourself. And I thought about all the writing I had seen and the texts. I considered how humans do the same kind of things now as we did in the past. Give away things, be interested in our ancestors, make stuff, graffiti on things. Which reminded me of a thought that a friend said, which is, you can read a place like you read a book. And with that, you must be aware of subtexts, metaphors, hidden narratives, myths and dead ends. I thought about invisible things, and then I realised that was where I would start if I was working in Kings Cliffe, because actually, how do you make the invisible visible when you realise that if you're overlooked is more detrimental to your mental health than to be rejected? So if I was interested in improvisation and care, I would be coming here and be considering the invisibles. There you go. You're welcome. More quints. Carol's getting those to go back to South London.
So no one put that in their bag.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Kate. So over to you, Carol. Thank you.
Okay. It's interesting. Yes, with the quints. As an urban kid, so I'm a Londoner, born in London. It's a rare thing for when I ask anyone for directions anywhere. Often they are not from London, as my parents weren't. But that's important. It's that meandering. It's that what makes community. That's what's underpinned my work, and I consider myself a creative. And I kind of like playing with the word flaneuse as well, because I just think, yes, I know about guided board and all of this, because guess what, I went to art school, so I could just loll about, but I didn't, because I got bored. because I went to Canterbury, which is lovely, and the idea of designing wine labels and chocolate boxes beyond bored me, because I was meandering about housing estates in Brixton. So I grew up in Brixton. I lived through the uprisings in Brixton, and off I went. That was my first exploration of elsewhere and the journey, which has led me to here. And so my first image for the tech are my boots on a map, which is in a community centre called Blackfriars Settlement, which is connected to this area through Octavia Hill, because the settlements were for social good. And as a child, I went to the settlements because they offered free community activities for after school. They were set up by the Women's League. This one, Blackfriars Settlement, was actually set up by Helen Gladstone, daughter of the Prime Minister, friend of John Ruskin and Octavia Hill. So they were all around at the same time. And this is a map on their floor. And we all go there to point out where we live. I actually live there. And that's a map I show the youth who I work with. So I work and I meander with people of all ages, be that toddlers, their parents, people in need of mental support. I'm going to pass that round. And I go further afield than that. I think, okay, you've had the opportunity to go meandering down to Canterbury, get a degree in art. People are like, what a waste. You know, my family were totally against it. They thought, she's going to end up a derelict. You know, can you not be a secretary? And absolutely not. My mother wasn't having any of that. She was like, no. She was from a generation that wasn't given the opportunity, even though she'd won scholarships in her native Jamaica. It wasn't the done thing. My mother grew up raising cattle, so to hear Kate talking about cattle, because my mother, when she'd go shopping with my brother and myself, she'd tell us how to kill a chicken. And we'd always say to her, well, living on this council estate in Kennington, there's no need to kill a chicken because they're already dead and they're hanging up in the market. But it's all that detail which has remained with me, and doing the work that I do and the exploration. My mother will want to know about the countryside. She'll want to know what's growing in the community gardens, which I manage with community members. She'll want to know about brickwork, like this one. This is Birmingham. So I'd gone on a little tour of the canals, and this is Utopia printed on this brick. So I'm forever looking at urban geology or geology anywhere. So when I've come here, I've already photographed up and down the street the brickworks. I've looked at the notices in your notice boards here as well. I've had a rum in the bar because I've Jamaican heritage, and it would be very wrong of me to have whiskey. So they don't do whiskey in Jamaica. So I've had the rum and I'm totally sober. I won't be falling in no river tonight. And so the brickwork. So I had a really lovely walk with Mark connected to the Grand Union Gallery of the canal, so that we could just spend 4 hours just chatting to each other and walking up and down. And that particular day I felt the privilege. I'm going to pass that Utopia brick around, and that's a slag heap. So they were these bricks gathered from the slag heaps, because I really loved that canal history, how that relates to the working class people, the influx of Caribbean and Asian people into that community in Birmingham. My youngest uncle on my mother's side lives there. So looking at the tiles, looking at the brick, totally fascinated by the blue plaques and the introduction about the blue plaques of London, because I'm forever looking at the blue plaques, taking people on walks. I take carers twice a month on walks around London. I choose what the locations are, and we always end up in the City of London at least once a month, with them recalling working in the city and the conditions that they worked, the cleaning, the cooking that they've done, and the herbs which they've grown in the gardens, and the shorter walks through in the city, the longer walks are in Epping Forest. So we're following definitely the lungs of London, but also we look at heritage, we look at place, we look at where we're from. And this image here is from the first coffee shop. Here stood the first London coffee house at the sign of Pascal Rose's Head. So this place was a political hotbed. And we like that. We like that. Anything that's called dissent. When we go walking, meandering, chatting or bantering, bants as the youth say, my nephews say bants, I'm allowed to say it now and again because I'm not Pally. I'm their auntie, but you know, they're a different generation and I love it. I just love throwing out a word to them and then seeing them go, okay, I see you, auntie. So if when I go on these meanders with my carers group, Lambeth Carers Group, if we do not find somewhere with political connection, they're a bit disappointed. They like the squat. I took them on a whole squat culture walk of Kennington, because I grew up in Kennington Park, which is Kennington Common, which was the Chartists walk, the biggest walk in history for workers' rights, suffragettes walks. So we went to the coffee shop, we spoke about the cost of coffee, we spoke about Blue Mountain coffee from Jamaica now only being able to be sold in Japan because it's so expensive and exclusive, and the colour of the soil in the Caribbean or the Mediterranean, the red of the dirt. And recently I was fortunate enough to go meandering with two young men and hear their feet. This are tiles in Lisbon. So this is a trip, a youth exchange, permaculture youth exchange with about 6 countries. And these young men normally would not be the type of youth that go on these youth exchanges. This is Erasmus Plus. And one young man's Romanian heritage, grew up in Spain, and the other man, like myself, is Jamaican and Ghanaian heritage, born in London. He's a South Londoner, good lad, and well done his parents. And that is our feet standing up on the first morning of this epic journey, which saw the school talking about permissions from family, letter writing saying, yes, he's 17, please bring him back in one piece. I'm glad to see the back of him for 2 weeks. And the school agreeing to this because they knew the importance of that journey. I wasn't looking at it in terms of importance. It's like, do you want to not be at school for 2 weeks? Yeah, good, let's sort that out. Rebellion. And feet, the looking, the care. And this is Oslo. My mum was supposed to be in this picture because I sent a film. My mother lives in Florida. So she gets updates on what I'm up to just to make sure I'm not derelict. She's still not convinced, even though she's the one who encouraged me to do art. And these are feet from a sculpture park, Vigeland Sculpture Park. And she disappeared to look at the trees and everything green around and just left me to it on a rainy day. And she said, I fancy going walking with you by the river that you sent me the video clip of. And that was it. Our family didn't see us. She wouldn't go to the family home because she said, I've done that before. I used to live there for 30 years. So we have to explore. So I love it, the fact that she's 78 from a rural part of Jamaica, and it's like, let's go explore. Let's see what's around the corner. And that's what I think when I go out of my door from the A to Z photo, the very first one. What's out the road? What's around the corner? What's going on? And sometimes I get lost. But I kind of like it because it's like I never know what some days where I'm going to end up. I don't know. I never looked at the map here. All I look at the map here was like, you are here. And I think, that's good. I'm here then. This is one of my favourite little walks, and it's the Jubilee Walkway. 25th anniversary of Queen Elizabeth and the 50th one, which are the gold ones. So we just walk around these. We sit down, we have coffee, we stop in the Barbican. I go and plan the routes with the carers, comfort breaks are important, anything if we have wheelchair users. And you do that, but it's never mundane when we do that. And if people want to end the walk early, that's cool. We will do that. And coming to the second to last image, Portugal, lake in Portugal, just a workshop we did looking at patterns in nature. And that was one of the young men said, okay, I'll support you with the workshop. But as Kate said, it's about empowerment, because I could see in quite a few of the people who I work with, there was mental health support needs. And on this trip, there was so much revealed to me about the young people from the other nations that were there, but particularly the two young men that I had gone with. And I'll be sitting down with their families later this month, because that so touched them that they just went off. I gave them a little guidance to do patterns in nature, all the lovely permaculture textbooks on it. And then I went off and washed my clothes. I just left them to it in front of 40 people under a yurt. And I said, yeah, you'll be all right. And it's like, no, we won't. I said, yes, you will. And they were. And to finish up, this is Lambeth, because I grew up in Lambeth, South London, of the musical doing the Lambeth Walk. So I loved the sort of hodgepodge of cultures and things. So I could do the Lambeth Walk. I can't do it now. I'm not going to subject you to it, and I'm not doing it in the dark outside either. So we had to do old-time musicals. So this was our Friday at my school in Kennington, and I loved it. So we used to sing Roll Out the Barrel. You cannot believe it, but it's true. All of these old musical things, because we were in that part of London and we were steeped in all of that and played on bomb sites. And it just prepared me for work, the type of work and the meandering and the looking at art, and the observation is very important. So I totally love these things, these things laid into pavements, and always searching for a connection. And of course I found Lambeth Bridge, and this is the City of London. This is the City of London, the most CCTV part of the world. And you can just imagine, as we're just all of us, the carers group, we're all just walking really slowly to try and find any little connection with the Caribbean, Mediterranean, wherever people's heritage is. And we just go into buildings as well and ask them, what's the history of a certain building? And security always looked a bit flummoxed. It's not like we're doing a flash mob moment or anything like that. But it's taking people to somewhere that they haven't been. It's that journey, and that's, I think, really important for me. The observation, the sense of belonging, and empowerment. And that's the last image there. So thank you for listening to me bantering on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carole. That was brilliant as well. Just very powerful introductions. So now's the time when we go for our walk. But before we head out, I'd like to mention a few things. So we'll be heading out into the dark with our torches, but as also Kate has said, by the light of the full moon. So yesterday has quite deliberately been chosen to add extra atmosphere to the proceedings. For our online viewers, through some extra wizardry, we'll be filming our walk. But if the live feed cuts, we have an interesting slideshow for you until connection is restored. To our audience here, you're welcome to ask questions of our speakers at any time during the walk, or relax and enjoy listening to their discussion. So it's completely up to you. So we're going to go up the road, down the road, round the church, up the road and back to the pub. And then we'll have a summary here. So yes, now time to go out. Thank you.
Perfect. Brilliant.
Is it your phone that's going, Chris? Not mine. I can hear it.
Past you to go and put a hat with dare on.
And the quid's back. I know they were beautiful on Bridge Street. Yeah, smell beautiful. Yeah, yeah, Carol's taking it for her kids tomorrow. Yeah, umbrella.
Will it be a problem if I put my coat on?
I don't know what.
Okay.
Are we okay to leave our bags here?
Yeah, it'll be fine. Well, it'll be between Carol and Kate. Right, torch.
Got the torch.
That's not my bag. That's just got. Oh, I've left my bag. Left my bag up there. That planning went wrong. I'll be going back and get my bag.
What have you got? Oh, that's it. Cool. So torch. Yep.
You, James? Okay, thinking through. Hello, hello. Yes. Hello. Is it that that's making it flicker? So I'll just stick this on whatever interesting.
Oh, the losing.
Out the toilets. Don't want to live stream him come out of the toilets.
Head on slowly, and James is going to be filming this. Do you want to be close to Carol and Tate?
James got a microphone as well. It's recording sound.
I think so. We're not sure. It's a bit flaky at the moment.
Genever by
No, this is where. So we worked out, didn't we? So this is. So I brought my family tree. We looked at it and we looked at it in the Heritage Centre on their computer system, and they've got loads of fantastic information. And we worked out this was her house. And do you want to say anything about it? Do you remember it?
I don't go back far enough to remember. No, obviously no. Blue roundels are from 1911. The census in that year. But actually, this house, which is number 10 West Street, and beside it, number 12, were at one time one house, and they were the birthplace and home of a very well regarded law writer. So that's where he was born, somewhere in this. He was one of 9 children. Yes.
Do we know what she does? She.
That's an interesting knowledge you've had, and strangely, it kind of ties into something that someone else in our group suggested that we might do as a project for our 21st anniversary. so we know what they do then. There it probably be very different.
I used to know somebody who lived in this house, and she was an artist, so that fits in,
Oh,
doesn't it?
yeah.
Well, my
Oh, yes.
Sue, would you mind just explaining a little bit about roundels and just for those who don't know?
Yes, well, this is a project we did last year, and actually we stole it from somewhere up north, which I can never remember, but one of our members visited there and saw that they had done a blue roundels for a significant moment in their history, and he thought that was something we might do. We decided to choose 1911 because we had the census information, and that's the most recent census information that's available. And it's also a census, the first census where people completed their own details on the enumeration sheet. So there's something really rather lovely about knowing that you're looking at the handwriting of the person who was the householder talking about himself, and usually was it himself, and their family and what they did. So the closest about the village who was here just before the start of the First World War, and that inevitably things will have changed by the next census. So the 1921 census, which should become available in 2 years' time, will be fascinating to see who was still here and what had changed.
Brilliant, thank you, Sue. And if you look, what I would say when I took this,
really?
all of these words, all these initials and names and traces of people are here, and it's not only are they on the blue plaques, they're marking themselves on the wall.
Our stone is very
it's gorgeous. They're everywhere. And you think, oh, graffiti is something modern, and actually it's here and in churches and all over the place.
Yeah, blocked up.
The window tax is a lot of it.
Yes.
Robinson Bailey, sub-postmaster and wood turner.
Yes, he was part of a massive tribe, the Bailey family, in all its parts. Was an extensive tribe of wood turners and carvers. That was what the village had been famous for thousands of years. We've got records we can trace back to at least 1600 people turning wood, either to make spoons specifically, which of course were very important in people's lives, or other small wooden artifacts. Never chairs and furniture, it was always a small tree. This gentleman was one of the last in that family. After the training returned, he became the sub-postmaster in 1904. So he's here on the postcard views of the post office when it was there.
If you think about what's interesting to me is that there's still a massive amount of skills in this village. They just, what are those skills? And whether they're technology skills or like you were saying that lots of people still work from home, or lots of people in the village work from home, but clearly they're working from home on computers, or they're not necessarily wood turning people. Oh, there is.
And we have a lot of crafty people in the village.
And there is a gallery up the road that you can hear. Oh, where?
Do you want
It's
to
music.
There'll be a lot of
I'm musician.
Classic car restoration.
Yes,
There is.
Yeah.
Down here our sewage works.
Yeah.
The other end of the line.
Probably the biggest employer in the village.
Apparently, the middle of the road is Kings Cliffe. Yes.
you can walk up a little bit.
Helen Parker, which is the case many of these round. Yes.
Nobody else about, and you can hear everything.
It's one of the things I try and do is to find a place where I can't hear any engine noise.
Yeah.
But you
You have
go
to
a long
really,
way.
yeah, and it's amazing edits out that, not, like if you live somewhere, you get to know the sounds, you can hear the birds, and then all of a sudden you think you don't hear traffic, but then you record it and there's just traffic noise everywhere.
But when you get somewhere where there's no engine noise, your body feels different. There's some sort of engine noise.
Do you notice that in Tate and working in London? Well, yeah, because and taking people to other.
When we sit in the garden on my estate, down here by the building, there's people scraping the buildings. When people come to record something, or when we take it, we're actually the Heathrow. So it's really interesting. We sit there, but we filter it out. Yeah, we're in a place of tranquility and calm. So we're completely ignoring it until somebody comes to record a piece at the garden. And it's like, did you hear the noise about? So if there's an incident going on, we knew something was going on before we heard it on the radio because we started to hear the television, so we can hear them in the emergency services and the noise, and then people suddenly start coming out. They start coming out. They start gathering, and it's like for support as well. As soon as you hear that, you come out, you start looking, you start to receive the information. But when we're in the garden about that noise, and that we see those as our little green oases, because you're just lost, you just switched off from what's going on around you and the rush, because of the famous, you have to be rushing about in London, but not in the garden.
When I came out the pub, I don't know his name, the person who said that when they first moved here 30 years ago, there were no cars, and that you could, or less cars, I'm guessing.
You walk up and down the road without worrying get the car.
Yeah. Certainly very many cars now parked along the streets.
Up the middle of the street.
How long ago was that?
30 years. Yeah.
What it used to be was there was a guy who had sheep, and he had a field either end of the village, and he'd run the sheep down the main street on a regular basis, and it was not bin zone.
We still do it on the main road from the Stamford Uppington Deeping Road on the what was the 16. We take sheep along that road, but always do it at funny times of the day, so to avoid as much traffic. But you wouldn't believe how the response of people in cars, they're filmers and do everything, and I'm thinking, I look like I've got my full farm gear on, and I'm seeing as exotic and a novelty running sheep down the street. But yeah, it's brilliant.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really good to do.
Yeah, I've had that look because I have because I do beekeeping and I've got a pink bee suit, and I very rarely have to have the veil up on my face while walking down the street. But I live at the back of the Old Vic Theatre. But when I walk through, people just think I'm in party here. They don't realise beekeeping until they see me in different bits the pies in a wheelbarrow. That's my favourite way of transporting the different hive bits from where we make our frames or the beehive parts, and walk down the road with a pink bee suit is quite a sight, and boots with little bee prints on them. It's quite a look. It's a look. You know?
I think I look just as odd in my village.
Yeah.
And where did it rates? Was this
the name? Yeah, the name of people who lived and had farm buildings at the bottom of the lane. Oh, 150.
I wonder what they were.
Yeah, they're around.
Oh, is that his there?
Yeah, and they had farms and buildings at the bottom of the lane as well.
So this
is one of several lanes. There are 3 on West Street, and there are 2 on Park Street, which leads to back lane. And that's pretty cool. Yeah, really, and it just led to fields where people needed to get to work. Yeah. We could go down Lake Lane.
Shall we cut through?
Everyone go first?
So we go down that way?
Yeah.
You want to take us through Janet? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh no, I prefer it now.
This is Church Walk. And that's where the church is. Oh, only an image second.
This is the bit that I didn't see earlier because I came right way
Just
down.
say it's the nature's name.
This one.
What's the name of this part? What's the specific name? If you walk past the corridor. There's a name of the
You and I, we must.
So I came far away.
How do you pronounce it?
How do you pronounce it? The Pitetrel.
You call it
Pitetrel. Oh yes. Oh, look at it.
a quiet place for anybody to come.
Who maintains the trees? Who planted
It was,
them originally?
planted by members of Transition Kings Cliffe.
Okay.
And yes, they're maintained as a community effort.
Okay. People can come and pick the fruit.
Yes, but the trees are still
Little. Young. How long ago was it planted then?
Probably
5 years. Do you know how many trees are in here?
yeah, because I had
How many trees?
okay, so you're in a photograph then. Yes,
I reckon about 20.
so they're a mixture.
They're young. They're young though.
They're all
fruiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting soft fruit trees.
So is there a little information? Who is the people of that? They've got tree tags. We've got the map of
So probably Kirk who
Yes,
there'll be somebody who will have mapped it.
we
Could I-
have a beautiful album which is unique because it was put together by hand. All writing is Keith Neville's
beautiful writing.
handwriting.
Is it italic?
And it's all photographs of the process that they went through, clearing the land and planting the trees and so on.
Yes,
That includes a plan of
Yes.
where each tree is
Yeah.
and what it is.
because it will be help with
And they
making.
have the tree tags that
I say that because every community garden I've set up has an orchard, and the last one is 6 years old, and it's an espalier orchard. So when we had the quince handed round, the very first orchard I did in SC1 had quince trees because the school children chose quince. They said, "What wouldn't grow on a housing estate normally?" I know, quince, because we've got apple, pear, plum. We've got blackthorns on one, we've got figs, we've got nectarines. So today I was out in the community garden before I went to get the train, looking to see what the figs were doing, you know. And it's the best year we've had for the fruit trees this year. So we're going to have wassailing. We love wassailing. I personally love cider. So we'll toast the trees. We've just gone past that October, so we had some events for that. But yeah, I got excited when I came earlier, but it was too dark to come and explore it. So I'm very happy that we've come to the orchard.
Well, you can hear the water running. Kate will be interested in that. Because the river runs across the bottom of the picture. I wouldn't suggest that we went down there.
there's a site. I was here this afternoon and it's very high to the gate.
So is the river? What's the name of the river then that's running past there?
It's the Willow Brook.
Willow Brook.
It's a tributary of the Nen.
Okay.
Or Neen, depending on where you were born.
So is that used to water the orchard? Is there an irrigation system?
No.
Unfortunately, it's watering cans literally to the willow brook, for bringing it up.
So is that like tap water you use to water this orchard?
No,
I'm
no,
asking a
no,
lot of questions.
we fill up our
You
watering
drink
cans
from the
brook
Willow Brook.
and bring it up and water it.
Manual labour, it's in keeping, isn't it?
Yeah.
Me as a soft southerner from London, I'm like, yeah, quite right. You know, but it would be interesting to hook up an irrigation system. It's doable. Build a pump. Come on, transition town people. This is a good project. There you go. I've set the challenge now, haven't I? Build a pump to pump. That's what they were doing in Portugal. Actually, they were building a pump to go from the stream, which was coming from the mountains, to water the orchard and their polytunnels. And it wasn't that expensive. And it was things that they've done in Africa previously. Some of the permaculturists. All right, I'll come back next year. And check you out.
Yeah,
I'll check you out. I'll come check out the orchard in daylight.
So we've just heard the 8 o'clock, which means we're only got half an hour left to finish, to wrap up. So we need to head to the church now.
Ooh, orchard. This is a daytime visit.
Churchyard.
Where did the name for this come from?
It was beautiful last night.
Yeah, it was.
It looked very coastal.
Yeah.
There was definitely moon shadows in my garden.
So you were saying before then about what it was when I ran a thing. Yeah. It was have to remember by listening.
Were you involved in the I think
It's quite a common name, I guess. It's like wither around.
around here, there's one because it goes to the steelworks or the energy, the steelworks.
Okay.
It's soaking up our sweat. We've got the boat making to be aware of it.
Yeah.
But this, I'm guessing, this is not that. Because it splits up. I was really surprised. No, they didn't find out. I just actually thought we don't think yeah.
Would you like to would you have been back?
What you suggest about abstraction? Oh, right, yeah. Let's make consumption.
20 seconds, just quiet, just to listen to the trees. Of this place, I found very rich, and so I stood here and listened to the quiet, and I just thought that was a really nice thing to do, because it's fascinating to hear about history. It's about a sense of place and how places make you feel, and you can hear the trees and the river as well. And so I thought, wonder if we could walk around here, Sue, would that be okay? Yeah.
Talked with the missing bits apart. Jamaicans wouldn't normally encourage this, by the way. They was they say this is duppy.
What business?
Duppy.
Duppy
Ghosts, yeah. And be like, oh, this is what your art led you to. this is it. So, yeah. It's like not doing trick or treating. This is what I was doing in Berlin as well, actually. Walking through the graveyard. Ooh, important person over there. That's interesting. I wonder who's over there. That's a whole family going on there, isn't it? And I love the lichen and moss that take their place on the tombstones. I think they're kind of a site of scientific importance when you have ancient tombstones, because you'll find moss and lichen that you would never see or find growing anywhere else. Wow.
So,
I wonder what the next thoughts of the tree is. Oak tree.
yes,
What importance is this oak tree?
it was planted, I can't tell you which year, it's on the plate. It was planted by the oldest resident at the time. His
Okay.
name was Rose Latimore,
Mm-hmm.
and it was because we were chosen as the best kept village in that year. Can you read the date? Gosh, 1987. Hey.
Yeah, 87. That's amazing. That's amazing.
What are we looking at? Sorry.
This was the oldest resident planted this tree because this was the best kept village. 1987.
So it's growing.
It's growing.
Right.
Good age.
Yeah. I mean, this place is probably part of the oldest part of the village. This area is called Hall Yard, and as far as we know, this is where the original settlement was. There was also, from the 12th century onwards, a royal hunting lodge in Kings Cliffe because it was within the royal forest of Rockingham, which is a hunting forest, and so the kings needed somewhere they could stay when they came hunting. And we don't know for sure because we haven't done any archaeology yet. We understand it was to the south of the church. Well, that would be about here. And there's a water mill, which is certainly in the Domesday.
We should go and see.
Yeah. Well, there's
Another
another time.
time.
There, which leads to the water
Is it now?
Literally the grill and food. Goes
Does
underneath where
he,
you're
what
standing.
does he know? Do they put anything through it?
No, so we only got to go in 36 months ago. Using a huge deposit because we lovely to go down and see laying out this old huge mill wheel. And then the health converters and like I don't think it's a working
There's an interesting story I heard about mill restoration.
Yeah.
So there was old guy called Jim, who's probably one of the oldest people in the village who's lived here all his life. And his family was associated with the mill. And when it was decommissioned, I think it was in the 50s or 60s, they had to take the old equipment. There was various
I've got an upstand at the back. Can't see it from in front, but from the side you can see it very clearly. It was built to look like a writing desk because it's the tomb of William Law, and he was a theologian and writer. Very, very prolific writer, books, pamphlets, letters, all sorts, and really influential as well. So John and Charles Wesley actually came to visit him to discuss their thoughts when they were developing. And he's buried here because he lived over there. He was born in Kings Cliffe, lived here most of his life, and as well as his theologian, his fame as a theologian, for us as a village, he was a great benefactor. So he founded a school for girls in 1727, which was really early. And then soon after that, a school for girls was founded by his companion, one of his two companions who shared Hall Farm with him, Mrs. Hutchison. She had money. And then they also founded almshouses, and they're, those are still operating now. So,
they're alive.
yes, it was William Law's own theological library, and very heavy numbers, not like bedside reading. That's all now at Northampton's record office.
Oh, is it?
Yes, it needed to be in better conditions than it could be kept here with very old books.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sue.
Okay. Which people wonder about. And it says, presented by T.J. Law, Esquire, who lived in Hall Farm at the time. 96 square yards of space to the church wardens of Kings Cliffe in 1897. So of course that was the year Queen Victoria had her Diamond Jubilee, and there were 2 cottages, his cottages, which he rented out, and they stood in this space, and he had them demolished so that people could see the church and get to it more easily. Not sure what happened to his tenants.
Somebody's left their hat.
Oh, it'll still be there in the morning.
Okay, so we've got about 17 minutes. I was going to take us up there, but I think it might be nice to go back inside and have a couple of minutes chat before we do our summary. It's gone ever so quickly, so.
I know, I'm loving this nighttime tour. This is great. Have you done one before?
Yeah, we're quite walking up and down in the night. Yeah, lovely.
Up on the right hand side.
Yeah.
There's an old shop. You can tell it's not.
Yeah.
I thought of your pictures of feet because in the doorway it says Edgson in the tiles, and that was the name of the people who had that shop 150 or more years ago.
Yeah, I'll come back to another visit. I actually stand there. I do that everywhere today. I'm doing that as well. Standing there near some 150-year-old frame covers in Bermondsey. This is the thing, though. I now can't help myself. Do not encourage me to stand with my feet other places. I love it. I love it. I know.
But also,
She's going for a walk? What's that about?
She was inspired.
Inspired her.
Okay, well, sorry to bring us in. I was time checking as we were going along, and sorry to interrupt a couple of occasions. I was trying to. This is a new experience, so this is actually a learning curve for me as well. I just thought that was amazing. Actually, I think we all got a lot out of that. What I've asked Kate and Carole to do is just have maybe take a couple of minutes for them to have a quick chat between themselves about any sort of key moments, key themes that have come out, any feelings, any atmospheres, and then we'll have to do our summary. So, thank you. So, who wants to go first?
Walking at night through a village that I've only been in what, as failing light is an experience. It's brilliant. And looking through people's windows. Yes. There is just something about being nosy, isn't there? You know, and I just realised walking, so pleased to go down a narrow lane. And the feel underfoot as well. You know, you start to do that peripheral vision thing of, I don't want to fall down that pothole, and just taking in the detail, and just as the lane opened out, but also walking through the graveyard, and my family would say, this is doppy business. Why? It's Jamaican expression. Why are you walking past people's graves at night? It's kind of like a taboo. So this makes me very excited and happy to report this back to family later. You'll never believe what these people had me doing in Kings Cliffe, and it'd be like, this is what your art life has led you to. So you've reached that level that the family was worried about. But brilliant. And to the orchard at night, and how beautiful, yeah. Well, I'm definitely coming back in the daytime to look at all the nooks and crannies. Yeah.
Thank you, Carol.
I suppose I was talking to somebody, and when we were out, about how I really love to night. I go out a lot walking at night, and partly to just enjoy how you see a place differently. And I just stood and had a really lovely moment with a lady when we were looking through the tree as the moon came out, and how I talked about how these things are impossible to photograph, but that you have to love those moments with your eyes. And we talked about how when you don't have a camera, and how or you're forced into a position to try and remember these things. And to me, what is amazing about being out and about at night time and looking is, well, it comes back to this. It becomes, it's like the beautiful, magical science of something, of a place, and and gorgeous. It was really, it's good. I really loved standing in an orchard in pitch black, talking about 3-year-old trees that none of us could see. It's the way forward.
It really is. Oh,
yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
I love it. Yeah. It's brilliant being out with people that know the place really well.
Yeah.
We don't know that. I don't know the place, and just how you share information and histories and observations. Gorgeous. Yeah, really good.
So I think I know we've got different appreciations of the word psychogeography.
Yeah.
But I think we've all had that experience tonight on different levels. So we've had the history, we've had sense of place, we've had difference of cultures. So City of London versus Kings Cliffe. You know, what you experience in London, you will experience differently here, and vice versa. But it's all about walking. It's all about community and talking and sharing, and you've got individual feelings of a place as well as community and group feelings of a place.
And paying attention to a place in different ways. Really good. Yeah, nice.
So thank you both. That was amazing, and thank you, Sue, for your very helpful insights along the way.
Yes.
thank you. Brilliant.
Brilliant. So I'm sadly, got 10 minutes, but maybe give a couple of minutes to you guys. Is there anything that stood out for you on that walk?
It must be said that the world of difference between here and Kennington. You mentioned you get in touch with the soil in Kennington earlier, and I thought, where do you find that? Yeah, in the park, I know.
Yeah.
But there is a world of difference here. Yeah, you were talking about solitude you could find in a city.
Yes.
Is that a rare thing?
It's this time of night. It's walking through. It's walking through when it's dark or very early in the morning, and it's where you walk as well. You know, you can no longer find that in the City of London. You could 15, 20 years ago, but certainly not anymore, because there's so much retail and nightlife that they've built into the square mile in the City of London. So you go on the outskirts. On near to where I live in Blackfriars, and it's so quiet. And then you can hear the Thames, you can see the Thames, or you follow the Effra, you follow the rivers. As Kate was saying, I hadn't realised until I heard you talk about before I moved to where I am 14 years ago, I would never have felt the pull of the river. and all its tributaries, and the search for it, the Walbrook, the Effra, the Earl's Sluice, all the hidden rivers, and looking down drain covers as well, and going on walks and things like that, and taking people. And it's nighttime. It's nighttime. It's when Extinction Rebellion reclaimed the city, and you get to play cricket on the bridge. Westminster Bridge. It's just surreal moments. You just cannot describe walking down the middle of one of the most busy parts of London, and people are doing art classes, you know, within the gaze of the Houses of Parliament. And it's those things. So solitude has different things to have different meanings to different people, because that and not being jostled and those fried onion smells and things like that, because they're not going to be there.
But I think to counterbalance that, I think that there's probably a similar problem around, it doesn't matter whether you live here or in London, there's still issues around isolation and people being alone, and we can live in these villages and think that we've got a very beautiful, gorgeous, romantic place to live, and it's quiet, but actually there's still people living in very marginalised ways. And I think, but to be able to come and see your place differently, I think I think it's probably my job as an artist is to introduce people to, and your job too, is to introduce people to look differently, to see the positive, to see places anew.
Yeah, because what I was doing in Berlin was, how do we look positively at the city? And one of the things we were talking about, and which I'm going to be having a meeting about, are orchards and forage. So one of the things so I haven't been tonight, but I'm going to say it, is about knife crime, you know, which is very real, and postcode wars in my part of London, where SE1 covers Lambeth and Southwark, and I'm born in Lambeth, but I live in Southwark, and that's been the case. I've either lived in one or worked in the other, gone to school. So we're talking about orchards and connecting the youth through orchards, you know, and finding a place of sanctuary for young people, and talking about nature, because there is much nature and beauty in those urban areas, but unless someone takes your hand and says there is the solitude, there is the beauty to find. There are people who are isolated, and we have those conversations all the time. And we always liken the community garden to leaning on the garden fence. What if you lived in a village? And this is exactly how we talk about those community gardens. Those are our little villages. That's where we get to find out the well-being, physical, mental, spiritual, of the occupants of the block of flats or the terraced housing, who are isolated because their children have moved out of London, or they're not with their community. They might be migrants, whatever their circumstances are. But it's those community orchards, it's those spaces, it's the forage trails, the green links that we are building.
And I'm guessing your community orchard was put in for the same reason. You know, you live in a beautiful place, you're surrounded by beautiful countryside, but you're wanting to create a place where people can come. That's right, isn't it? You want to people can take us. Yeah.
The environmental growing.
That will say again.
Environmental climate change growing side. Combined with the community.
Biodiversity, encouraging biodiversity, because I don't know, and you'll know more about this, because what I hear often is the monoculture planting. Because when they did a survey of honey, they did a competition, and a 16-year-old, this was Hugh Fernie Whittingstall, I must be going back about a decade, when he had one of his programmes on the telly, and when they tested the pollen, the diversity in that part of London, which is Hackney, was staggering, because it was the window boxes, it was the parks, it was the hedgerows, it was the green walls and the green roofs. So when they've done,
probably all our honey comes from rape.
Yes, and that's it. And I've walked through rape fields with the Ramblers, and Nordic pole, because I like to just see what people get up to when they go walking. Go a bit of a nerd like that. I'm just like, oh, Nordic poles walking through this place in Croydon, let's do it. Then I encourage other people to do it all the time. But the diversity, and it's that appreciation, as you say, Kate. It's on your doorstep, but you can walk just to the tube every day, just to the tube every day. And it's saying stop and listen, as we've done. Stop and listen. Let's do the bird count. What? In the middle of a housing? Yes, we're going to do the bird count. So we look forward to that. So we're speaking to 14-year-old ornithologists. And let's map the area. So we'll be mapping. And it's communal knowledge. And it's the commons as well. So Thursday we're doing a map of Blackfriars, what we know, what the wildlife, the orchards, and then we have an art event in December next month, and then the face painter's not going to do Superman and Spider-Man on people's face. I just saw the WhatsApp message and it made me smile. But they'll be putting local knowledge on people's faces, so that means that adults can have their faces painted as well. You know, because they do, though. They have tigers on their face. You go, really? You're going down the road like that? We've got standards in South London, come on.
I'm going to have to stop you
No
there.
worries.
We could
Really
keep
sorry.
talking.
I thought I might leave it on knowledge on people's faces.
Yes.
I think
Yeah,
that's
nice.
brilliant
Yeah.
to sum up. So I want to thank both our wonderful, amazing speakers, Kate Genever and Carole Wright. Or was it Genever?
Yeah, it's okay. Keep going.
And Jeff from the Cross Keys Inn for being a wonderful host. He's been amazing for us. Jessica for tweeting, Martin for filming, and James following us around with the camera and not tripping over. I thought that was great. And Arts Council for funding the event. And as per usual, I always let you know what's coming up with Firming Woods. So we have our next exhibition at our gallery space, The Arches at Fine Shade Woods, which is Abigail Lane and Lala Meredith Buller, with an installation which is open to the public on 30th of November, and with an artist talk on the 25th of January with Richard Wentworth and Yasmin Canvin. And I'd like to end by saying that this isn't the ending of Free Exchange. Tonight has been a taster, and it has been an experience of what is to come. And in our next artistic programme, which is In Steps of Sundew, a series of artistic interventions exploring the effects that extracting resources from the landscape has upon those living within it, taking place between Fine Shade Wood, Dean Park, Kirby Hall, Corby and East Carlton Park from 2020 to 22. So until then, thank you for being here and watching online. Good night.
Well done, Emma. Well done.